Hi, my name is Taylor, and this is going to be my first vlog post, a little intro into the vlog assignment for my FDOM class at Texas State. This first vlog is going to be about camera basics and my take on them and what I normally have my camera set to. So there are 3 things that you need to know and master, and basically it needs to become a second nature for you so that when you're out taking photos you can just quickly hop back and forth between the 3 and really know how to properly expose your picture. So those 3 things are aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. All 3 of these contribute to the exposure of your picture, and all 3 settings also each individually contribute something different to your photo. So let's start with aperture. Now, aperture is also known as your f-stop. So the smaller your aperture number means the more light you're letting into your camera, because the smaller your number means the wider your lens is. So let's say we're starting at a 1.4 aperture, and the bigger the number means the smaller the opening. So let's say we go down to like a 22 aperture. Then your lens is not going to be as open, which does not allow as much light into your photo, making it darker. So this makes your photo lighter, this makes your photo darker. I usually keep my camera aperture at a 1.4. So here's the difference in 2 pictures. The first picture, the aperture was set at a 1.4. And then the second picture, the aperture was set at 16. So I did brighten both of them up so that you can just compare the depth of field on both of them. Not only does the aperture affect the exposure of the photo, but it also contributes to the depth of field. The smaller your aperture number means the smaller depth of field. So everything in the 1.4 photo is blurred out except for my hand. Whereas in the photo where the f-stop is 16, everything is in focus. You can see the door behind my hand, you can see my hand, but that photo did come out a little darker. So to sum up aperture, your smaller f-stop will create a smaller depth of field, but your lens is more wide open, which leads more light into your camera. A bigger f-stop means a bigger depth of field, everything is in focus, but it's darker because you're not letting as much light into your camera. Now on to shutter speed. So for shutter speed, like I said in the beginning of this video, it also affects the exposure to your photo. The higher the shutter speed means the darker the photo, the lower the shutter speed means the brighter the photo. Basically, because if you have a low shutter speed, you're opening that shutter for a long time, letting light come through. If you have a fast shutter speed, you're opening it and closing it, so not as much light is getting through to your camera. A fast shutter speed is really useful in sports, if you're photographing a baby or pets, something that moves really fast and you just want to pause time. You just want to create a still photo of that moving baby or that moving basketball player. Long shutter speeds are what you would use, like if you've ever seen those photos with the people holding the sparklers and spelling out a word, they do that with a long shutter speed. Because the longer you have that shutter open, that the camera is sensing what you're drawing in the air. So forever how long you have it open, it's seeing that and it's capturing that onto the sensor. So this first example of me waving, the shutter speed was at 1/640, and as you can see, my hand is still. It's just caught in time, it's paused, nothing is blurry, there's no motion blur. In this second example, the photo was caught at 1/60. And as you can see, my hand is blurred out because it was a slower shutter speed. Now on to ISO. I know a lot of photographers go back and forth on their ISO, maybe during sessions, But during my photo sessions, I never touch my ISO. I always keep my ISO at 200. That's just me. I know a lot of photographers are different. I refuse to go up past 200. So your ISO basically just means how sensitive you want your sensor to be to light, to the light coming through. How sensitive do you want it? At 200, I like it at 200 because you don't get any grainy look into your photo. The higher ISO doesn't necessarily mean that the quality of your photo goes down, but the higher ISO does add a little bit of grain to your photo. There are some ways around this, like if you're shooting in a place that's not too dark, then you won't really notice the grain. But like I said, higher ISO does add a little bit of grain to your photo. Some photographers add grain to their photos on purpose, to add a little bit of texture. Personally, I don't like it. So as an example, this first photo, I had the ISO set to 100. Like I said, I usually have it set to 200. The lower you go, the darker your photo. I don't want my photo to be dark, so I have it set to 200. This example is set at 100. And then the second picture, the ISO is set to 6400. That's a really high ISO. And as you can see the grain and just the fuzziness of the picture. So all three of these settings each complement each other. You have to use all three of them. For cameras, you can choose to have your camera at aperture priority mode, so you would switch it to the A, to where you're telling your camera, I just want to be in charge of the aperture, you do the rest. Same thing with the shutter speed. You can tell your camera, this is how fast I want to put the shutter. You decide what my ISO needs to be. You decide what my aperture needs to be. And your camera works all of that out for you. So that's it for my super short camera basics video. I hope you learned a little bit about how to use a camera and how to set it for according to what you're doing. So I'm not completely sure if I'm allowed to say this in the video, but this is for a school assignment. But I look forward to doing a couple more vlogs at least, so that I can see if I like doing it. And hopefully if I like doing it, I'll eventually add them to YouTube, so not only my professor is watching them, but I can teach other people my ways and my tricks in photography.